Hi, my name is Jess and welcome to my channel, Reads of a Ravenclaw. Today I'm going to be doing my April 2017 wrap up. So I haven't really made many videos in the month of April. I think I've made one other video and I'm sorry about that. I did have so many more things planned. There's been a Raven Cycle review that I've been wanting to literally put up since I finished those books about 2 months ago. But I'm kind of at that point in the year where school has just taken over my entire life. I'm doing my A-levels, it's very stressful, and I just haven't had as much time for YouTube this month as I really would have liked to, and I probably won't next month either, or early June. It's going to be, my videos are just going to be quite patchy over the next couple of months, but I'm hoping as soon as we get into the summer months, a lot of that pressure will ease up and I'll start being able to make much more regular videos again. Luckily, like, my reading hasn't really been hit too much by it. I got in 3 books this month, 1 play and a poetry anthology, which I am really pleased with. So let's just get in with the books that I managed to read. I'm currently nearing the end of my Harry Potter reread experience. I've got about like 150 pages left of the Half-Blood Prince. And so the 3 books that I read this month are all from the Harry Potter series. And the first book is Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. Rowling or Rowling? I've literally been a fan of J.K. Rowling's for over half of my life now. I'm 17. I first read her books when I was 7 and I'm still not quite sure how you say her name, but yeah. I'm not even going to bother giving you a synopsis for this book because it's right in the middle of the series, and honestly, if you haven't read Harry Potter yet, I would so recommend doing it. It's the series. And Prisoner of Azkaban is definitely my favourite book in this series. I went through sort of a period when the 7th one came out where I was kind of thinking that that could possibly be my favourite, but every single time I've revisited the series, this has always been the one that's really stood out in my mind to me. And I've been thinking about why that is, and I honestly think, for me, Prisoner of Azkaban is one of J.K. Rowling's cleverest books in terms of plot. I mean, the entire series is just really like one master example of plotting, but there's just something about Prisoner of Azkaban and the way that you have all of these newly introduced characters, but also these threads from old characters with Scabbards just coming together, and just the way that she sets up the plot for this book, it's just blown my mind. I remember first reading this when I was 7 or 8, and it was one of the first times where I really thought about the author behind the book, and I really thought about what she'd done and how she'd set up the story and how she'd set up the plot. This is the book that got me thinking more like a writer, and writing has always been a really big love of mine, and I really think a lot of my fascination with like the art of it came from reading books like this that I just found so clever. I also adore the Marauders, as do a lot of people in the Harry Potter fandom, and seeing their introduction it always makes me really emotional. That scene in the Shrieking Shack, that scene, every single time, it makes me so just on edge and excited and all the things. Every single Harry Potter book makes me feel all the things. It's also my favourite Harry Potter movie. I've always felt that the atmosphere of the Prisoner of Azkaban film is maybe a tiny bit darker than the book, but in a really satisfying way. I think it's an excellent adaptation. I also ended up giving Prisoner of Azkaban 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read this month was Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. This is, I think, where things start getting really serious in the series. This reread was so satisfying because, again, I remember picking up this book for the first time and just feeling like everything was getting really intense and dark, and that's what I really love about this kind of midpoint in the Harry Potter series, is you can slowly feel the story sort of closing in on you, and I think that J.K. Rowling does such a great job of building that atmosphere up and then slowly just like contracting it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I feel when I read this series. I feel like the first couple of books are just sort of setting the ground and getting things going, and then everything's just like getting tense and clashing together, and I think that clashiness really starts with this book. And this reread has reminded me how much I appreciate side characters like Cedric Diggory. I feel like my feelings towards Cedric Diggory have just been tainted by Robert Pattinson, and I have nothing against Robert Pattinson, but at the time when the movie came out, I remember my sister didn't like him, so I just hated everything that my sister hated because she was cool. So I never really liked the movie version of Cedric Diggory, but the book version is just the kindest little soul that I've ever met. I also really like in this book how you get to see a little bit more of the international magic scene with Beauxbaton and Durmstrang. I think it's so interesting just to kind of compare and contrast them with Hogwarts, and again the plotting in this one is just absolute perfection. There comes a point for me in every single Harry Potter book where I know that if I hit that point, it doesn't matter how late it is, I'm going to be reading to the end. That's just what I love about her. She's just so compulsively readable, and these books are just so compulsively readable, and I love this one too, and I give it 5 out of 5 stars. And then the final book I read this month was, of course, Order of the Phoenix by J.K. Rowling. And I would say that the highlight of this book for me is just all of the secondary characters that come into it. Tonks, Luna, this is really where we get to start seeing more of Neville and Ginny, and I also love them with all of my heart. I think character is a really big strength for J.K. Rowling as well. I know I've like praised her plotting skills because they are insane, but I do think that she does such a great job of crafting memorable characters. Like even her secondary characters, like the people from the Ministry, you remember them when you read them. They're just so distinctive, from like their names to the way that they're described physically to just their voices. She's such a great character writer. In addition to it, she's just a very strong writer. I also love this book because of Dolores Umbridge, and I mean I hate Umbridge. I actually think I hate her more than Voldemort. I think if you'd asked me at age 8 or 9 to pick a character that I wanted dead by the end of the series, I would have said Umbridge. Like, Harry can take his chances against Voldemort, but this bitch has got to go down. She's just so well written. Just her little like smarmy smirkiness is just so fun to just completely hate, and I love that. I love that like kind of cathartic feeling of just completely hating a fictional character. So of course I also gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. So the poetry collection that I read this month, I don't actually have here with me now because I got it out of my college library, and that was the Colossus by Sylvia Plath. I didn't actually end up enjoying this anthology that much, and I don't know what it is about it. I think it's to do with the imagery, and this is going to be such a weird thing to say, but there's just something about excessive nature imagery that gets on my nerves. I know that poets like talking about nature. I know that it's a key thing to a lot of movements, to a lot of poets, and I've got nothing against nature, but sometimes it just feels really excessive, and I think it's also the fact that I wasn't expecting it from Sylvia Plath. I don't really know what I was expecting from her poetry, but I found a lot of it to be quite closed up. Like, a lot of the time when I read poems, even if I don't know what she's saying right away, which often I don't, I still get a gut feel, or I still kind of get the mood for the poem. But with this collection, I found that I was having to read things over and over and over again to even like get that kind of feeling. I had a few poems that I really liked. I really liked The Spinster in the collection. I thought that was a really well written poem, and there's another one I can't remember the name of at the moment. She's talking about people in a museum and someone who's mummified or something along those lines. But really, like, the poems that I did like in the collection were few and far between. Writer, and I'm not saying that she isn't an excellent writer or a good poet, I didn't get on with her poetry. It wasn't for me, so I ended up giving it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. And the play that I read this month is another reread, but this time it's for school, and that is Othello by William Shakespeare. So I studied this play last year, but I'm going to be examined on it again this year, so over the Easter holidays I thought that I'd just reread it again and just make sure that I had down every single thing that I would need to be able to do a good job on my essay of it, and it just reminded me how much I really enjoyed this play. Turns out that Shakespeare's a good writer, would you believe it? Seriously though, I do love this play. I really like the plotting of Shakespeare's plays as well. I just love how you can just see him setting things up just so grandly, and then I love just watching them fall to pieces. There's just something about that like huge just arc and then plummet that I really like about this play. I also just really like the richness of the themes. I feel like race is obviously quite key to Othello in the way that he portrays it, and just the racist stereotypes that you could argue that he even endorses. I find it just so interesting to read it through that lens, because the only other Shakespeare text that I'd studied before was Romeo and Juliet, and you don't really get much of that kind of side of things to that play. I also really love the female characters in this. The scene between Desdemona and Emilia, the Willow scene, when they're discussing love and whether they would cheat on their husbands, there's just something about it that I I love to read. I love Amelia. I think out of every single Shakespeare thing that I've read, which to be honest isn't much, she's my favourite that I've come across so far. But yeah, just this reread reminded me how much I loved this play. I think it's one of my favourite plays, and I have actually read quite a few plays over the past few years, and this is definitely staying one of my favourites, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I don't know if you've noticed, but the amount of times I just like hit myself in the face with that over that review, it's so floppy. So there you have it. That is everything I read this month. I should definitely be getting my Harry Potter reread finished over the next couple of weeks, so I will be coming to you with a discussion of that hopefully within the next month at some point, and I will try and keep posting videos as regularly as I can, but sometimes school just sucks and gets in the way, so I'm not really sure how regularly the videos are going to be coming, but hopefully I'll be speaking to you again soon. So until next time, goodbye.